What is something weird your parents did that you used to think was completely normal? Slept in separate beds. My dad slept in the king-size master bed, while my mom slept in a dinky twin bed next to it. I mean, now I know that that kind of thing happens for one reason or another, such as insomnia, bad gas, whatever. In this case, it was because my dad was an extremely restless sleeper. But I didn't find out it wasn't the norm until we were watching TV when I was about 10 and there was a couple on the TV sleeping in the same bed. And I went, what the heck? Why are they both in his bed? Where is her bed? For 18 years my parents did this. 18 freaking years. My dad slept in the bed and my mother slept out in the living room in a recliner. I thought this was normal. Then when I was 19 they dropped the bomb that they were getting divorced. Had me and my brothers drinking with them. My family is Italian and we used to drink Pepsi mixed with wine all the time when we ate pasta. I was 8 when this started. I mean, it's definitely odd in the Western culture, but I mean in Italian culture it's the norm. Not like they were getting you hammered or anything. You just had some wine with dinner or whatnot. If I call my dad he will pick up the phone and not say hello or anything. Just sit there quietly at the other end of the line. If it's an unknown number I do this. See if it's a scripted message or not. I can hang up without saying a word if it is. Whenever my mother would open a new jar of peanut butter, she would always call for my brother and me to have a dip before she made our sandwiches, or whatever it was that she was preparing. A dip, in this case, referred to our family practice of sticking our pinky fingers, after we'd washed our hands, into the fresh, smooth surface of the peanut butter. There was something very satisfying about it, in a way that made it seem like licking our fingers clean was almost entirely an afterthought, rather than being the actual purpose of the practice. Truth be told, my brother and I were a little bit too fanatical about the routine, to the point where we'd actually discuss it, sometimes at great length, whenever we became aware that our current jar of peanut butter was running low. Now, I mistakenly thought that everyone dipped into their sandwich spread when presented with the opportunity. But of course, that wasn't the case. This realization wound up causing me a rather profound sense of shock when my friend Alex's mother took it upon herself to make lunch for her son and me one afternoon. I watched with rapt anticipation as she opened the jar of peanut butter, removed the freshness seal, and then completely skipped asking for the assembled children to dip into it. "What are you doing?" I shrieked, seeing the woman's knife pierce the peanut butter's surface. She turned to look at me, obviously concerned. "What's wrong, Max? Is everything okay?" I stammered, unable to get the words out. "We didn't dip." The woman's worry quickly gave way to confusion. "Dip," she repeated. "What do you mean?" I did my best to describe the concept, but my 5-year-old brain was already preoccupied with a sense of mild panic. I was eventually invited to demonstrate, but I steadfastly refused. After all, the peanut butter had already been violated by the butter knife, thus rendering the entire exercise pointless. While I did manage to explain, several minutes later, what the dipping routine was supposed to involve, the situation was almost too much for my tiny brain to comprehend. Some people, it seemed, simply did not dip. Were they barbarians? Didn't they understand that dipping was absolutely essential? Or was it? The next time that my mother opened a jar of peanut butter, I responded to her summons like I always did. Upon arriving, though, I held my hand back and looked her in the eye. "You know, Mom," I said, "some people don't dip their peanut butter." She was less shocked than I had been. "You've seen nothing. Some people don't lick yogurt lids." Jarping eggs. I recently uncovered how weird they are when I visited my in-laws at Easter and they had never heard of it. I then asked around a large sample of people and none of them had heard of it either. Basically, you get a bunch of eggs and hard boil them with red onion skins in the water. This turns them a pleasing autumnal brown color. You then all take an egg and bang them against the ends of each other's eggs until only one person has at least one unsmashed egg end. That person is crowned victorious and presumably wins at Easter. My mom had a really weird remedy for removing a finger sliver. If my sister or I got a sliver in our finger, she would soak a piece of bread in milk and wrap it around our finger with a bandage. We'd sleep with it like that and she would remove the sliver the next morning with tweezers. All her other first aid techniques were much more conventional, but looking back that sliver thing was just weird. My mom doesn't work and my dad follows an academic schedule. I didn't realize most adults work during the summer. Same. Both my parents worked in academia, so I assumed everyone had summer holidays, even adults. Not answer the phone when it rings. My parents would never let me go downstairs after everyone had gone to bed. It was almost like going downstairs was like blaspheming on the Bible. They would flip their crap if I went downstairs after bedtime. One day, aged 15, I snuck downstairs because I had a migraine, and upstairs was too hot and stuffy, making it worse. In no less than 10 minuets, Dad comes bellowing down the stairs, threatening to throw me out of the house. WTF. When it's time to dust, my dad would open up all the doors and windows and use a leaf blower. Didn't know there was a different way for a while, and that the peanut butter went in the fridge. Found out like 3 years ago that was weird. When it's time to dust, my dad would open up all the doors and windows and use a leaf blower. Didn't know there was a different way for a while. There are other ways, but there aren't other correct ways. My dad has always had bad OCD, the kind that you see on TV of people doing weird rituals all day. Well, one of these things would be right when he walked through the front door from work. He'd walk a few steps, whisper something to himself, stop, walk a few more steps, whisper more things to himself, and repeat this process for about an hour all around the house. If a person or animal simply walked in his way, or somehow disturbed this ritual, he would have to do it all over again. Never thought much of it at all until I moved back in with my parents as an adult for about a year. Whoa, that is a major disorder. Poor guy. Well, my father loved hanging things on the walls. Paintings were nice, we had plenty, but most of what we had, particularly in the front hall, were masks. Yes, masks, all sorts. African, Asian, stuff I couldn't identify. If you ever watched Home Improvement, there were some episodes where you saw the inside of Wilson's house. It was a bit like that. I came to see them as guardians for the house. Scare away bad spirits, luck, juju, that sort of thing. After my father passed, we split the masks, totems and crap 3 ways: mom, bro, me. Tradition will continue. That's pretty cool. I'm glad this thread isn't only abuse stories. Raised by grandparents. My grandmother was always sick. She would find things on TV, newspaper, diseased her friends had, and suddenly would develop them. She eventually died after faking a back injury and somehow talked a doctor to operating on her. She never walked again, and 3 years later of actually suffering, she died of congestive heart failure. Although everyone's grandmother got mysterious illnesses, that is until my mother got out of prison and developed the same condition. My dad used to do this weird thing where instead of being there for me, he'd go smoke crack and not even call me for months. I came for laughs, not for feels. Told each other and my brother and I that they loved us every day. They provided food, clothing, shelter, and so much more. It wasn't until I was nearly 30 that I realized how amazingly well adjusted my family was. We did, and actually still do, love each other like family. My mother and father have been married for nearly 50 years. I thought everyone had a family like this. I heard about child abuse. I thought that those kids would go home, get abused, then life would return to normal and dinner would be had, etc. The values my parents instilled in me have lasted my whole life. My world contains compassion and kindness that I rarely see in others anymore. Be a good person. Treat others like you want to be treated. Live your life to be happy, not for physical things. I got jealous reading that. My parents call farts butt burps in order to be more polite. Why? Butt burps is the grossest phrase ever. It's so much worse. We called them booty bubbles. Equally strange and revolting. My mom was obsessively clean. Everything, everyone in the home at all times had to be perfect. It wasn't until middle school that I realized her standards were unrealistic to most. I used to think most kids had gone through the experience of having to get all new dishware because their father smashed it all in a blind rage, and that the corresponding markings from the smashed ceramic were commonplace in most kitchens. Dad hitting mom wasn't weird, it was a natural consequence of a fight getting out of hand. I didn't know it was frowned upon to go through an entire 12-pack in one night. although the after effects of it occasionally frightened me. The screaming bouts that permeated the house at midnight could be easily drowned out by cranking up the volume on my Ninja Turtles VHS. My dad was, and is, unemployed as much as he was employed, and it was not uncommon for the only interaction I had with him to be him yelling at me about losing the remote before he retreated back into his bedroom, the door of which he had broken. Of course, I know now that the things he did were extreme and, in most cases, abusive, and I hope to grow up to be better than him. TLDR. My dad had weird ideas about home decorating. My dad always lined up his french fries in a row when he would have them dumped out on a plate, and eventually I started to do this too. People continue to look at me weird when I have french fries in a nice orderly row on my plate napkin. I do the same as well, and so did my father. My mum would make us pour out our cereal into the toilet if we didn't finish it. The sound it made used to make me gag, and I never eat cereal with milk now. I don't know why it made me feel so sick or why we couldn't just put it in the bin. Not weird. This makes perfect sense. You wouldn't pour excessive liquid directly into the garbage can, but you wouldn't pour waterlogged cereal down your sink drain, unless you had a waste disposal. My family always made us flush stuff like this that we didn't finish down the toilet as well. Checked to see if the oven was off and the toaster unplugged, and the door was locked several times before we left the house. My mother made us lock the door, pull it hard, jiggle the handle back and forth like we were trying to get in. And we always had to make sure the stove and oven were off even if they hadn't been used that day. Poured Tabasco sauce on my tongue when I talked back. It's no wonder I dislike spicy things now. For swearing we used to get our mouth washed out with soap. No wonder I dislike eating soap now. Cut pizza with scissors. Mine did that too. It seemed so weird, and then one day, as an adult, I tried it too. It makes so much sense. My mum did used to call them pizza pies, with no trace of irony though. Both my grandparents and parents keep their unopened tinned goods, baked beans, tinned vegetables, soup etc. in the fridge. We had plenty of space on the cupboards, so I grew up thinking that this was perfectly normal. When I moved into university accommodation at 18, I soon learned that it was perfectly okay and normal for tins to go in a cupboard. They're actually meant to be stored that way, so yeah. We would break into houses that were being developed, vacant houses that weren't finished yet. We would drive around neighborhoods until we saw a house we wanted to look into, and then the fun began. I can remember reaching through the hole where door handles should have been and unlocking the deadbolt from the inside. We'd try all of the doors, and if that failed, we would boost my dad through a window. There was an area house we couldn't gain access to. Once inside, my parents would walk around and check out the floor plan while my sister and I went off and played with nails and electrical wiring or whatever else. We did this for about 3 years, and then my dad became a general contractor until the 2008 crash. It was all good fun, the whole family participated, we never got caught, and we did it at least twice a month. I had no idea that was weird until my sister and I talked about it years later, and I realized we were committing several minor crimes. My family did this when I was young. We owned one of the first homes in a new development, so whenever they would start building a new home we would go check out the floor plans. However, the doors were never locked or even had doorknobs, so we just had to walk in, and there was also no playing with nails or electrical wiring, just investigating the layout. My dad would beat the crap out of me if I showed any type of emotion, then do some drill sergeant crap and make me do push-ups and stuff to man up. I was like 3 when that started, so I legit thought that was just what fathers did to make sure their sons grew up to be men. TLDR. I don't talk to my father anymore. I totally relate this. My dad was emotionally and verbally abusive, stopped just short of physical abuse. He would grab and hit things near us, but he never actually hit us. And I was not allowed to cry. I still really don't know how to express negative emotions. Make tea with the drip coffee maker with loose leaf, and the coffee maker was never used to make coffee. I use a drip coffee maker to make tea. I use a Keurig for my coffee. When we were out and about in town, and my dad wanted to pick up booze, he would tell us he was going to the daddy pop shop. Calling a bath a tub. I got a lot of crap the first time I told my husband I was going to take a tub. He's all, "Take it where?" Where I grew up, it is popular to say you're going to take someone a bath. Like BRB going to take Junior a bath. It irritates me beyond words. Mother, tarot cards. Vegan that eats bacon. Part-time with paid-off house. Father, shouts at inanimate objects. I shout at inanimate objects, doesn't everyone? Does this mean I'm weird? Edit. Not constantly, just if my computer's not working or something. Drinking. I had no idea how much more my parents drank than your normal American. My dad has drank at least 2 glasses of whiskey every day for my entire life that I can recall. It wasn't until I moved out and met more people that I realized that most people don't get at least a little drunk every night for decades. They had no friends. None. I had to learn how to make friends as an adult. Well, frick, I always thought it was. Maybe I'm the weird one for never having done it. I lived with my gay dad growing up. He gave me baths until I was 10 years old. No weird stuff. But he washed my hair for me and I washed my body. Way too embarrassed to tell anyone that now. My mom washed my hair until I was 10 or so. No weird stuff either. She just must have thought I wasn't capable of doing it myself. Everything to do with a farm. Lived on a farm my whole childhood. Only in high school did I realize that I had a strange childhood. Yeah, my next door neighbors were about 2 miles away when I was growing up. I like solitude. Also, have realistic expectations of where meat comes from. Always close gates. I'm not scared of cows, and I'm handy with a shovel, garden fork, shifting rocks, putting up fences, feeding any size animal, etc, etc. My mother put our toothbrushes in the dishwasher to sanitize them. I only realized this was abnormal when my boyfriend wondered why the frick we had so many toothbrushes. Move the tissue box on the nightstand so it would be out of the direct sunlight, as thus wouldn't start a fire. My parents weren't crazy, but my dad has stories that he's mentioned a few times. Highlights. 1. His mother would see an empty parking spot, make him get out of the car and stand in said spot for her to loop around. He reserved it. 2. His mother would pull into the gas station every day and buy $1 of gas. Wouldn't fill up. 3. The kids left beer and cookies for Santa. My parents would go to the bathroom past midnight and I always thought that was normal until I found out they were doing it and just needed to pee to clean their reproductive system. My parents never ever let people anywhere in the house. Ever. They were extremely unwelcoming. Also, they hated me owning fish. My dad had a complete tantrum because I bought a better and had him in a 2-gallon tank in my bathroom. They pretended I didn't exist. Thought it was normal. My dad used to have conversations on the phone whilst on the toilet. These days even having conversations with your phone whilst on the toilet isn't unheard of. Played Rock Band Guitar Hero with me extensively. Gamer parents will be pretty common in the next generation or so. Not weird per se, but I didn't know some people were stay-at-home parents outside of TV. Both of my parents always worked. It's weird because to this day at the age of 25, I now judge former classmates of mine who have kids and are stay-at-home parents. I know I shouldn't, but it's ingrained in my head to think that way. I thought every family hid birthday presents and made the birthday boy girl search the house for them. Nope. Just my family and my extended family, because my grandmother apparently started this. We had a female cat that fell pregnant by a neighborhood stray, and my parents were too careless to keep her inside or get her fixed. It was awesome for a while, playing with the kittens, seeing them go through the stages from where they were crawling flat on the floor with their eyes closed to climbing the curtains and sprinting around the house. They bothered my mother's allergies a lot though, so as soon as they were old enough, we gave them to a pet store to sell. The weird part was what my parents did next, which I was too young, too ambivalent to question. We used to go on long car rides to see relatives several hours south of us. On one trip, we took the female cat, doped up on gravel and put her in a cardboard box, folded closed, not taped, and my parents took her out of the box and left her at the side of the road, in the middle of nowhere, a couple hours into the drive. They abandoned her. As a kid I always wondered, hoped that she would somehow find her way home to us, but that never happened. Instead she probably died out there, or more hopefully, became someone's barn cat. She was a sweetheart and we really missed her. The only thing she ever did wrong was get pregnant and have kittens. Not sure it's worth mentioning, but in addition to her we had 2 fixed male cats at home that we kept until they grew old and got so sick they had to be put to sleep at the vet. I would argue they were neglected because of why each died, but I was yelled at or ignored for my concern. Only the one cat was ever abandoned. Your parents sound effective, given their conduct towards living beings that they voluntarily took custody for. They didn't put the first cat in an animal shelter. That leads me to believe they're either pig-headed or stupid. Glad they didn't drop you off in the middle of nowhere if and when you became less convenient. You have been visited by the source Chihuahua. You will be blessed with good pasta, but only if you comment simmer well. Papa simmer well papa. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.